Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023 public budget hearing for fiscal year 2024. The time is 6:30 p.m. and I am calling this session open and into order. The second item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda as presented. Do we have an approval of the agenda?
I approve.
We have a motion by Ms. Dorsey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Are there any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's fiscal year 2024 budget. Dr. Couch.
Hey, very good. Mr. President, members of the board, this is the official presentation of the FY24 budget. See if I can get this to move here. Oops. Okay. So the beginning part of the budget is a recap of our mission and vision statement. As you know, our vision is for all KCPS students, for them to graduate equipped to achieve their highest potential. And our mission is, as an anchor organization, we create an environment of academic excellence through a collaborative, equitable, and rigorous learning community. We have several strategic goals that are listed in our strategic plan that takes us through 2025. Goal number 1, support early learning to provide a strong foundation for future academic excellence and success. Goal 2 is equitable access to rigorous, culturally relevant curriculum and instruction aligned to the Maryland College Career and Readiness Standards, which is CCR. Goal number 3, access to an array of professional learning opportunities set within the highest employee standards to support optimal student outcomes. Goal number 4, create a safe, inclusive culture that meets the social and emotional needs of all students. Goal number 5, ensure families and community partners will be informed, engaged, and supported for students' academic success. And goal number 6, have and promote state-of-the-art learning spaces and tools that are equitable and inclusive. If you'll note, we developed these goals in 2020, and they very much align with Kerwin, with the blueprint. So it was very forward thinking on our part in terms of setting these goals, because you'll note that many of these are almost identical to those that are aligned in the pillars of the blueprint. The things that do affect our budget are the blueprint requirements. Pillar number 1, early childhood education. We have to expand publicly funded full-day pre-K. As you know, in Kent County, we have had full-day pre-K for 9 years. So we are well ahead of the game with our full-day pre-kindergarten. Many of the jurisdictions around the state are struggling with this. We already have this in place.
Does the state now include in the MOE funding towards our enrollment of
Yes.
pre-K?
Yes.
All pre-K?
The ones that fit.
That would have fit the,
yes,
well, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
In the second bullet is increase the number of high-quality early childhood education providers and educators. I think that we are doing a really nice job working with the providers that qualify within the community. There's only one provider that meets that standard at this point, and I know Dr. Keene and her group are working with them to get them to reach the certification that is needed so that they can meet the 3-year-old requirements that we're going to be responsible for in this pillar. expand supports for young children and their families, and then improve kindergarten readiness, student readiness. Pillar number 2 is high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. We have to improve educator compensation. It's mandatory that we provide a 10% increase by June of 2024. And then by 2026, we have to have all of our beginning salaries for our educators start at $60,000. So those are mandated by the state. We have no flexibility in that, even though in developing our own blueprint plan, we have some flexibility in tweaking some of our plans on how we're going to meet these requirements. There are some that are mandatory, and we have no flexibility whatsoever, and that is educator compensation. We have to increase the rigor of educator license and preparation programs. We have, through the Maryland Leads, we have a Grow Your Own program that we have in place, and we have a number of our employees that are working towards becoming certified teachers, and some of our IAs that are now in the program and working towards their certification as well. Institute new recruitment efforts to create a more diverse educator workforce. Again, the Grow Your Own program, we have a number of minority employees that are involved in that particular program that we have for our Grow Your Own. So I think that we have realized that recruiting locally and trying to get a number of our employees interested in becoming teachers is really the way to go in order to create a more diverse educator workforce. Establish a career ladder. This is probably going to be the next biggest task for us, besides meeting the educator compensation requirements, but creating a career ladder that recognizes the National Board Certified Teacher Program that we have to implement as far as moving forward in the career ladder. Implementing a comprehensive in-service training and professional development. Again, looking at what we need in terms of addressing the high-quality and diverse teacher needs, and implementing an in-service training and professional development plan that helps us improve our services to students.
Just real quick, and it's a little bit off topic, but since I see that Dr. Keene is here, I wanted to let you know that a teacher reached out to talk about the recent professional development that you organized and was very thankful. So I thought it was a good time to point that out.
Yeah. Pillar 3, career and college readiness. This is probably the largest pillar in making our plans moving forward on how we're going to address the needs of our students. So we have to ensure that all students have equitable opportunities to meet CCR standards in reading and math. We also have to provide intervention services to keep students on track to meet CCR standards. We've developed a pathway for our students that don't meet CCR standard, and how we're going to help them reach that, and also include a support pathway for those students. So we're developing the programming for our high school students as we speak, and we're probably going to have some additional courses that will be in place for those students that don't meet the CCR standard. We don't want to have them repeat the course. We want them to have a course that's going to be meaningful and help them reach the CCR standard. And then also expand career counseling and CTE offerings. One of the things that we described in our plan is that we are adding a computer science pathway next year at the high school. So some of our students will be able to declare computer science as their pathway, and so that is a new pathway for us beginning FY24. Pillar 4 is more resources to ensure all students are successful, improve the education of students receiving English learner services, improve education for students with disabilities, provide supports for students who attend schools with high concentrations of poverty. As you know, we do have 2 schools that qualify for high concentration of poverty funding, and those schools are Garnett and Rock Hall Elementary Schools. And then enhance our student health services. Those are all requirements of the blueprint. And then pillar number 5 is governance and accountability. Create a blueprint implementation plan to demonstrate fidelity to Maryland law. We did submit our blueprint plan on March the 15th, and we received our second round of recommendations from the committees that are reviewing the plan. So we're busily revising and adding to our plan, so it's a little bit more explicit in what our plans are moving forward. Deploy expert review teams to monitor progress in schools. We have that locally. We call them learning walks, and we do it 3 times a year at all 5 of our schools. Monitor implementation progress. Again, constantly monitoring where we're at and submitting the data to the AIB and to MSDE as required, and then monitoring our fiscal allocations to make sure that 75% of all of our funding is allocated to our schools. As you will note, the FY24 revenue forecast was somewhat alarming to us, because as we look at meeting all of the requirements of the blueprint, we also have to have the funding to be able to meet those mandates and requirements. One of the things that stands out in this particular slide is that we will see a bit of an increase in concentration of poverty funding that goes to Rock Hall Elementary School. There is a decrease in the foundation funding from the state. And just to note that the foundation funding is where we are able to take out the amount required to increase our salaries. So as you can see, realistically, for us to meet the mandates, we should have seen an increase in state funding for foundation, but we saw a decrease of $391,232. We also saw an increase in some of our state share for concentration of poverty, our TSI, and you'll see that our estimated county revenue increase for next year with restricted funds is projected to be $719,928. Although I will note that after the legislative session, there was a bill that was passed that also provides funding for the Blueprint Implementation Coordinator. So that amount will be adjusted somewhat, because that funding will be run through the formula. So we'll see a slight increase in state funding, probably, I think we said it might be about $25,000 from the state, and then the rest will come from the county. But that will be to pay for the Blueprint Implementation Coordinator salary. So knowing what we knew at that time, and also with the mandate of increasing our mandated salaries for our certificated teachers, we had to begin looking at where we would reduce our budget, because we knew the money was not going to be there. So this slide shows that FY23, current year, our budget is $30,780,914. We looked at what we could cut just based on where we thought we might save in the budget. So we figured we could cut $200,000 out of special education and $500,000 out of fixed charges. And so just moving forward into FY24, right off the bat, we cut $700,000 out of our operating budget.
Sorry, can you explain again that 200,000 out of special education, that we're not actually decreasing services, but that it is because of the sort of out-of-district students?
Right. I mean, we are taking a bit of a gamble because that is money that we believe that we would save moving forward into FY24, but cautionary savings, because if we do have students that have to go to non-public, then that may not be a realistic savings. We may have to put that back into the budget. But current year, we know that we saved about $200,000 in not having to pay for non-public placement of students. So that's where that saving would have come from, moving forward. So then, just looking at FY23 to FY24, we reduced our operating costs by $700,000. So our beginning place for our budget moving into FY24 was $30,080,914. What are the factors that what are the factors that impact FY24 budget? 7% inflation increase. FY24 required budget enhancements, which I will go over in detail. Our health insurance increase and our retiree insurance increases as well. That impacts us just about every year because everybody has to put up with some type of increase in your health insurance. I think everybody sees that in your private insurance, and definitely with state allocated insurance and county allocated insurance. I think the county is also looking at a health insurance increase as well. And then the requirements of the blueprint also impacted our budget. So the detailed 24 budget expenditures, the amount that we had to budget for retirement insurance increase was $75,000. Health insurance, $190,000. Retirement, I got that a little bit backwards. The retirement was just for, what was that, Lisa?
That is for the pension.
Okay, that's for the pension. $75,000 for the pension increase, and then the retiree health is $28,557. The blueprint requires us to hire a career counselor. So in the legislation, we are required to provide a estimated amount per student, and our share comes up to $106,573. That money is submitted and sent to the Workforce Investment Board, the Regional Workforce Investment Board. We send the $106,573 to them. They keep 5%, and then they send it back to us, and then we have to use that amount to cover the salary of a career counselor. It's kind of a strange way that it's worded in the legislation, but that's the way it is. I would note that they're keeping 10% out of every other county's allocation, but when we showed them that if they kept 10% of our 106, we may not have enough money to pay for the career counselor, they yielded in our favor and only are keeping 5%. So that was really good for us.
And the career counselors working with the high school and the middle school?
Yes, high school and the middle school. And then we put in here the late bus, thinking that, we still want to put that in moving forward.
I'd like to say something about the late bus. I was out at the school yesterday doing some things out there, and those buses, one of them had about 10 kids on it.
Yep.
And the other one had a fair amount, so that's great you're doing that. They can stay later for sports and everything.
The total number of students on those buses are about 15 to 20. So that's just something to keep in mind moving forward, because we certainly are going to be in a position where we're going to have to look at further cuts. The FY24 required budget enhancements, I'm not going to go through the entire list, but just a reminder that the total budget enhancement requests from all of our departments in our schools totaled $1.5 million. And the board, in your due diligence, went through the list. We had some very fluid discussions, and we cut that $1.5 million down to 112,800. So looking at what we project moving forward into FY '24, our state and local revenues are estimated at $29,633,064. We cut our budget $700,000, and so our beginning number that we have moving into FY '24 was $30,080,914. So you can see what we're proposing moving forward doesn't even meet what we're getting from state and local. Then you add in the $75,000 for pension, the $190,000 for health insurance, the $28,000 for retiree health, the career counselor, the late bus, the budget enhancements. We've got a shortfall of $1,030,883. So, knowing that, we looked to see where we could make some additional cuts out of our budget. We proposed cutting 5.5 teachers, 5 instructional assistants, 1 custodian. We looked at trying to be a little more efficient with our health services. So instead of having a CNA and an RN in every school, just staff the health offices with an RN. In addition to the RN, 5 RNs, we would have a coordinator and then 1 CNA to help provide support if an RN has to be out of the office. Transportation efficiencies, looking at consolidating maybe at least 1 route. Looking at retirements, what kind of savings could we have with retirements? And then reducing our allocation to Discovery Education. All of that estimated savings was $900,000. When you add that with the $700,000, we are reducing our budget going into FY '24 by $1.6 million.
And just also, in case people hadn't been able to watch the presentation before, the 5.5 teachers that we are proposing as a reduction are positions that we just wouldn't be refilling. We would not be cutting.
That's not absolutely true.
Okay.
We would look for attrition where possible when we have retirements, and if we can do it in that manner, that is absolutely the way we would need to go.
Okay.
But I can't absolutely guarantee that that's going to be the case. We may be in a situation where we'll have to approve a reduction in force in order to achieve the 5.5.
Will you just not renew some contracts? I mean, can you do that? Or
well-
were you considering that?
Well, that would effectively be a termination. So it depends upon where we have to make the cut. For instance, if it turns out to be in an area in which we don't have retirements, say it was we decided to cut one of the teachers in art. That's not what we're doing, but I'm just throwing that out as an example. And we don't have an art teacher that's retiring, then we would have to do a reduction in force, which means the board would have to say, in order to meet our budget and to balance our budget, we would have to reduce teachers in a certain category. We would effectively approve that as a board, and then we would have to work with the union to make a determination on who that person would have to effectively be that would be without a job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a termination, but it's called a reduction in force. So when you add that totally, we reduced our budget by $1.6 million moving forward. Oops. Okay. So, FY '24 budget revenue requests. Looking at what we have to sustain current staffing levels, it was $30,080,914. You add in all of the add-ons that we talked about, then we came up with $30,663 $947. That included the $700,000 reduction. We put in the budget a $1.5 million, about a $1,550,727, so about $1.6 million as a placeholder for our salary increases. That includes minimum wage requirements, that includes mandated salary increases for our teachers as outlined in the blueprint. And then we took away the estimated $900,000 in savings that we would have by reducing some of our staffing. That left us with about $1,681,610 in shortfall. So that is our ask in order to balance the budget. So that really is where we're at as far as the revenue that we need in order to balance the budget. So what I would say is, if we do not see this revenue increase, and I think that we have all resolved ourselves to the fact that we need to use some of our fund balance. And what I would propose is that we put in $700,000 of our fund balance to help balance the budget. And that still leaves us with about a $900,000 shortfall, which would be our ask on top of maintenance of effort from the county. I just came from a meeting with the county, and I think what they are proposing to give us at this point in time is an additional $250,000 above maintenance of effort. So that would still leave us with short of a $700,000 shortfall, which is still pretty serious for us moving forward, because obviously that means we have to go back to the drawing board in terms of making some additional cuts from this budget. The last thing that I would share is that in order to finish the roof for capital requests, the county did not get to talk about capital requests, so I'm hoping we'll have a chance to talk about that. I did see on their planning for capital, they did have the Kent County Middle School design, but I think they had it pushed back to FY25. So I need to verify that as well, but that was still in the budget for them. We're asking for $3,315,000 for design, and we'll get a better idea once we go through the feasibility study which way we're going to go with Kent County Middle School. To finish out the roof in '24, they had estimated it would be about $1 million, but we're actually under budget. So their commitment to finishing out the roof is only $450,000 for the roof at Kent County High School.
That's a nice savings.
So, and that really completes my presentation for the budget.
You talked a little bit at the county commissioners today about the outreach that you have done with the state. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So during the legislative session, obviously we all, and I'm not going to take sole credit for that, because I know you, Mrs. Sullivan, and you, Mr. Getz, have also reached out and sent a number of letters to our legislators, and I testified virtually in favor of one of the bills. But I really felt that there needed to be additional outreach than just the legislative session. So I sent out a request to the governor's office, a contact that I have in the governor's office, Eric Ludke, who is the legislative advisor to the governor. And I actually made acquaintance with him when I was on the Kerwin Commission, saw him a lot from attending the meetings. And I sent a letter to him, an email to him, requesting a meeting to talk about the plight of Kent County Public Schools with regard to the funding and our size, and how we don't really see enough funding through the funding formula because of our size, and wanting to reach out and say, can we have a discussion? The discussion was very fluid. We spoke for, almost an hour, and that was during the legislative session. He said, when it's over, please, let's get together and let's see what else we can do. So last week, I had another meeting with Eric Lutke and Secretary Grady, who is the secretary for the Department of Budget and Management. And there were 3 other individuals on the call, and it was a very promising conversation that we had. We talked, I shared all of the size of our schools, I shared our budget. I offered to open up our books to them to come and look at our budget, see where we're allocating our money. And we talked a lot about what other states are doing to help their small school systems due to sparsity and small school size. What they committed to me was that they wanted to put together a work group. And my understanding is that's going to happen sometime this summer, and begin talking about what they can do to help us in FY25. So that was incredibly promising. I also sent a letter out to Rachel Heiss, who is the executive director for the Accountability Implementation Board. And I also sent a letter to State Superintendent Choudhury. I have a meeting with Rachel Heiss and Mr. Choudhury Thursday of this week. And the good news for us is Mr. Choudhury is very much aware, because in Texas, where he came from, they had a special allocation for small schools, schools that were under 2,000 students. And so he's familiar with that type of funding. He wants to hear more about it. I shared the document in which it outlined what 37 states are doing to help their school systems. And the other promising conversation that I had with Rachel Heiss that happened kind of independently was the AIB is presently contracting with APA. APA is the consulting firm that looked at the funding formula when Governor Hogan appointed people to review the funding formula in advance of Kerwin. And so they are presently in place. They're looking at the funding formula. They're helping to forecast what we can expect in FY25. And I would also note that Elisa Stewart, our CFO, also had an opportunity to talk with them and share some of the concerns, and they were very interested. Because, see, the difference is we keep hearing that the money's going to come. The money's going to be there. Don't worry, the money's going to happen from the state, and it's going to come from the state and the local. Well, now we have numbers. Now we have concrete numbers to show that it's not materializing in the manner in which they say it was. And it's not just Kent County, but it's other school systems as well. They're able to put hard numbers on paper and say that it's not happening. But we have, on top of that, we have a unique challenge because we're so small. So I think what I would say, and what I shared with the commissioners today when we were meeting during the work session, is I think, my commitment is I'm going to shake a lot of trees, and my promise to them is that I'm going to continue to talk to whomever will talk to us so that we can share the unique challenges that we have being a very small school system. And I think people are listening, and so it is my hope. I don't think, and I shared this with the commissioners, I don't think they're going to change the wealth formula. I think we can complain about it all we want, but I don't think they're going to change it. My only hope is, and President Fithian agreed, is that if we can get a special allocation for Kent County because of our size and because of sparsity, that really is where we need to really drive the topic home. And so if we can get that funding, whatever that would be, maybe it's $1.5 million, maybe it's $2 million, I don't know what it should be, but it needs to be something on top of the allocation that we would get from the state and the local. It should be an addition, an add-on. It shouldn't be in place of, it should be an add-on. And so that's what I'm trying to advocate for. So hopefully I'll have a better sense of where MSDE feels about this request, and maybe if we can get everybody on the same page. My hope is that during the summer and before the legislative session begins next year, we have a plan. And we have all the stakeholders in the same, in our corner, so that we can go up and we're not just waiting for someone to happen to want to help us. We have a plan. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Please.
No, I just wanted to add the comment. I mean, it's not as if there's a wheel that's being reinvented. There are 37 other examples.
Right.
As to how this works, so that's positive. Sorry.
So how did some of these other school systems that are in this, are half of them in this situation, or just 3 or 4 other systems, or are they all in this situation?
In what situation?
Having-
I would say probably of the 24 jurisdictions that are trying to develop a budget, I would say at least 20 of them are asking for more monies from their county.
Okay, so the question I have for you, Dr. Couch, is how do they require this? We have to have a budget? I mean, are we forced to have a budget?
Yes.
Well, what happens if we don't have a budget? What do they do? I'm just curious, what does the state do?
Well, we wouldn't be getting any funding from the state.
Yeah, legally we have
Legally.
options.
It's in,
I understand what you're saying, but the reason I'm looking at this, first of all, Kerwin has sort of put a little bit of this on us, okay? Plus, we have less students. But what I'm saying is, I'm looking at it from a business standpoint. If you go to, first of all, Hogan didn't approve this, this whole Kerwin thing. But if you have a problem with the mortgage on your house, or you can't pay your car payment, you go to the bank and you see if you can work out a deal, because they don't want your car and they don't want your house. What I'm saying is, what are they going to do if we go to them and say we're $700,000 short, and this is where, I'm just making a proposal, what are they going to say? They're going to come back and say, well, you can't, you're just out of business? They're not going to say that.
well,
Most of our budget is salaries and people, and most of that is negotiated in advance of the budget. We can't
Yeah.
negotiate those salaries without having a firm number that we know that we're going to get from the state.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying, they're putting us in a spot with this Kerwin, and I would push back a little bit. That's my own opinion. As I said, if you're behind on your mortgage, you're going to come back and say, look, I need
okay,
to work out a deal.
it's in Comar that we are required as a school system to have an approved budget turned into MSDE by June 30. What happens if we don't have an
That's all I
approved
wanna know.
budget?
What happens if you don't?
Okay, then we shut
have
down.
school.
We don't have school. We have no approved budget. We cannot pay anybody. The whole wheel stops.
You're given a certain amount, I think the superintendent will be given like 15 or 30 days, and a budget has to be approved within that time.
And
We don't.
what does the
we-
state just come in and take over the school system?
No,
I'm just saying that.
we close the schools, we lock the doors, nobody,
There is no school.
there's no school.
Because we all violate the law.
I just want to ask the question, 'cause I'm just, this is my first year. But isn't it, before Kerwin, we still had to meet certain budgets and certain expenses? And we generally had a problem doing that because of the lack of funds that would come in, maybe from the sources that they were supposed to come in, they didn't all come in, so you'd have to always
Right.
cut. You had to always do less than you wanted to do,
Right.
for our students, that some needed it but sometimes it had to be cut because of what wasn't given, of who didn't want to invest in these children.
Yeah, so
Right.
if I can just add some context, so in my 6.5 years, almost 6.5 years of being on the board, and also in my time of having kids in the system, because of exactly what you mentioned, there were avenues that had to be taken to follow the law, to consolidations and other various cuts along the way.
Right.
At this point, there is no other Moby Dick or any other whale out there that we can go after.
Right.
You know, I mean, and to your point, there has been a consistent track record of doing exactly what we're doing as a board, utilizing fund balance, going after and looking at where we can cut to the bare minimum, and then working through the same process of coming back with a number that we can't necessarily work with, but we always had a little meat to shave off the bone. This, whether it's Kerwin or whatever it may be, you know, this is just I don't want to say it's the same thing that is cyclical year after year, but this obviously is a different element than before, right? So, but this is very consistent with the process. The major factor now is we don't have any other whales that we can go after. There's nothing else out there.
We can't get any smaller.
We can't get any smaller.
Yes, and after so many years of cutting and cutting and cutting,
Yep.
it catches up. You know, or so many years of you know, only getting this percent when you was due that percentage.
Right.
You know, it's gonna catch up with you. So now we have something to blame Kerwin, but before that, we still had the same thing.
We still had to develop a balanced budget. I mean, we are required by law to submit a balanced budget. If we do not have a balanced budget and we do not turn in our budget, then the doors close. We no longer have funding to pay our people. We basically, essentially, close the doors and lock up.
So you think the state's gonna come in and just let the whole system close down? I'm just saying that this just seems like we're being forced, and next year it's even gonna get worse, and plus we wanna build a school. I just don't know where all the money's gonna come from.
Yeah, so just to answer, I mean, we certainly can't speak about what the state's going to do because no one, at least in my recollection of history, not one school system has gone and not followed the law. So I don't know. I don't know what the reaction is, but I just think that I don't recall 24 jurisdictions over 6.5 years that I've been here or before that no one's done that, because it has to be, a balanced budget has to be presented to the commissioners, and that's law.
Well, and, I mean, you have the potential right now of causing a panic also of employees who may not think that they will have jobs if we don't submit a budget.
The
So
state's not gonna close the school system down. Maybe they'll come in and they'll reorganize it or something, but these expenses are gonna get worse.
if we don't have a balanced budget, we cannot meet our negotiated contracts
Okay,
with our
fine.
employees.
Yeah, I mean, we're
And so then we have no employees.
just trying to follow the law. That's it.
Okay.
Well, we're not trying, we have to.
We have to.
So I'm sorry, I mean, we have to follow the law. There's no option.
And I just want to say one more thing. You know, when it comes to these our children, we can't play a guessing game and think, oh, I think they won't. Because if they do, then what? You know, if we as a county can't get together some kind of way and figure it out, then why is it you think the state wouldn't do what it says it'll do? Because really, we have to invest in our children. We want to say what isn't, or this is going on and that is going on, but really, the first thing, the foundational point, the resources, the different things that we need, like the teachers, there's a lot of teachers or aides that we don't have because we can't afford to pay them. So, you know, you need another set of eyes in different areas and you don't have it. You're trying to make it with what you have and work it out the best way you can. But sooner or later, things fall apart when it's not what it needs to be.
Well, and I'm
You know.
curious also, if we are talking about a difference of $700,000 or $800,000, why not use your passion to approach the commissioners and say, help us?
I'm sure we
They
could
don't
use
have the
that.
ability to stop schools from happening.
I
So
know.
bring this passion to them and say, please come up with this additional.
That sounds like a good plan. I'm just thinking that, I'm looking at all the school, all the teachers, everything you have here. I don't want to see anything cut anymore. You've cut it to the bone. That's what's bothering me.
You don't want to see it either.
Yeah, but I don't-
Nobody
You know,
wants
I'm
to
just
see it.
saying that,
I can speak for myself. I will tell you, I've lived through at least one consolidation as a board member and one as a parent. And
Yes.
both were just as heartbreaking. And I'm right on board that I don't want to see it. I won't speak for anyone else. For myself, I don't want to see it. But, this is very real. This is where we are right now, so.
I have kids in our school. I have 8 more years of kids in our schools, and we need to be supporting all of the kids in our schools.
Okay, are there any, I know Dr. Couch, you went through this. Are there any other questions regarding these items?
Public comment?
Well, I just want to ask from a timing standpoint. So Dr. Couch, we're having our hearing right now. Timing wise, obviously, it feels like that things continue to unfold. We still need some final numbers, answers from the county.
I think my feeling was I got those numbers today.
Okay,
And so I think I'll know for sure in 2 weeks, but I think we have to be prepared to begin looking at where else we're going to cut this budget, because my understanding is they will give us what they're required to give us, and then $250,000 on top of that. So of the $1.6 million ask, you can take out $700,000 that we'll put in from fund balance, 250 that they actually got from the legislature. So it's a pass-through money that they got from the legislature they'll give to us on top of that. And so,
750.
yeah, so from the 1.6, you take the 750.
so we're talking $731,000, 610
Yep,
and 63 cents.
yep.
So that is if
To fully fund it.
I'm not throwing any shade anywhere or doing anything inappropriate, but I have history of numbers being moved around after we get to a place. I'm not saying
What do you mean numbers moving around?
prior commissioners.
Oh,
So if it does go down that path, we have an additional $731,610.63 that would have to be cut from the budget.
right.
Okay, for a point of clarification.
one question is, and could you explain that $2 million that's sitting, that's non-negotiable? Is that
Well,
what
we're using 700 of it.
Okay, so there's 1.3 million left, is that what you're
Right,
saying?
and what I explained, and just, that's one-time money that has accrued during COVID. We were able to save money during COVID, just like the county, and all businesses, all public institutions have saved money through COVID because, they didn't require all of there were positions that weren't filled. There were, like in our case, substitute teachers that we didn't need to use. Anyways, we used 1.8 of that to build this year's budget. Next year, we propose to use 700,000, but what I explained to the commissioners is we're going to have to be able to replace that the year after. So basically double it. So we're proposing to use 1.4 because we'll use 700 in FY '24, and then we have to be able to replace it. Otherwise, we'll have to cut the budget again. So,
I see what you're saying, so maybe you can work out a deal, say you'll split half if they come up with the other half. You use a little more of that money, and then they can come up with half, maybe they'll do that. And also, I listened, I didn't make it to that meeting, but I heard them all say that, and you never know, because nothing's written in stone. If you come to them with something seriously, and you have a plan, that they'd be willing to help you. I'm just
It's a
saying, let's just make a deal with them, man. I think, or just try something like that.
Well, I
Because if you
mean,
use
I think our initial conversation happened today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the first opportunity to really sit down and talk about what could be done.
Mm-hmm.
So I offered to use 700. I think one of the commissioners understood that I didn't want to put us, like, for instance, if you used the whole
You
amount,
don't want to do that.
that would be fiscally irresponsible, in my opinion.
Of course, but if you used maybe a third of it, and they would come up with the other amount, it might add up to the 700,000. Just a thought, that would leave you, what, $900,000, a cushion?
So we have a policy that says that we keep a $500,000.
Which we're not even talking about
Which we're
that.
not even
We're not
talking about,
talking-
right.
no.
But I'm saying, if we are talking about using 700 this year, making sure that we have that 700 available next year, we still have to keep the additional 500.
Well, that's not even
That's
being
part of
talked,
this?
yeah, that's not even part of that discussion.
We have had other commissioners in the past talk to us about being, and this is before I was on the board, so I'm not referencing us, but talk to the school board about them being our fund balance. And
Oh, you don't want to do that.
I understand what they're saying, but Dr. Couch, I think, explained it really well today, that our budgets are not necessarily like other department budgets where this is what you have and this is all you need. We have instances where we need to pay ahead of time for grants that don't come in, so we need to be able to cover those. And we have instances where we might have a high-need student or something that comes into the school district, and we have to be able to still support that student. And we can't go to the county commissioners and have them say, we don't have the money, or we can't give it to you at this time, because we still have to find the money to be able to support those students and those needs of those students.
Okay, so do you ever have any instances where money is cut that you thought you needed the money for, and then it was cut during the year?
That is why we were able to have a fund balance, because we had
Right.
substitute positions that weren't filled during COVID,
Yeah.
other positions that weren't filled
Right,
during
like for
COVID.
instance,
So we're
we
moving.
let's say we allocate for a teacher, I'm just gonna throw out an example, a music teacher, that we need to, and we can't find the music teacher, so that money is in the budget, but you don't actually fill that position because you can never, because you cannot find the person. So at the end of the year, that's fund balance, because you haven't spent it. But then say you finally find one in April, well, then you're not gonna have that amount of money the
I
following year,
understand, I
because
understand.
that's where the fund balance comes from, is positions that you don't
What's-
fill.
What's the lowest that fund balance has been in the last, like, since you've been here? Has it been really low?
It has been as low as just 500,000.
Okay.
And have we been supplementing our budget every year with fund balance?
Yes, we have. And that's what I explained to the commissioners. We have always used fund balance. We've done our share in using what we can. I think there is a threshold that we don't want to cross and say we're not going to use more than X because it's bad financial.
I understand.
Practice.
Well, I agree with Mr. Getz that, I don't want to cut anything. We want to give everything we can to this school. It'd just be a shame to have to shave this down anymore. I don't want to see it. So we're going to be at an impasse, because if we don't shave anything off, then we're going to be $700,000 in the hole. And as you say, if you don't do it legally, well, they're going to shut us down. So, I mean,
I think that's what we have to do. My proposal to you is, we're here, we're not here to solve it. We're here to do a hearing and give
Okay.
people an opportunity to
That's
make
good.
public comment. I think if we're going to do the work of what do we do, I think that's left for the next board meeting.
okay.
Great. Okay, with that, we will move into public comment. Before I get the name, this is a public comment session on the fiscal year '24 budget. This is a limited forum to discuss that fiscal year '24 budget. We are accepting public participation on that topic only. The rules for public participation: speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. Comments about the actions or statements of individual staff members are not appropriate for public comments and should be referred to the superintendent of schools or processed through available channels. If submitting written testimony, speakers are requested to provide a copy to the president. Please remember that this is an opportunity for the community to address their comments to the board. It's not an opportunity for dialogue. If you have any questions that need an answer, please contact the superintendent or write a letter to the Board of Education, and a response will be sent back to you. I will be keeping time. We have one participant, Mr. Fluke. At 30 seconds, as always, I will give you the high sign or some other verbal communication. And I will start when you begin.
Hi, folks. President Getz, members of the board, Dr. Couch, I speak tonight as Dr. Bill Fluke, a career school psychologist, speaking from my mental health perspective as working in schools my entire career in public education. I want to commend your efforts and the school system's efforts for behavioral health. I was at the middle school last week wearing my NAMI hat. I wear a lot of hats. Saw a lot of you there. I will be at the high school on the 16th for the mental health resource fair there, and again, sitting at a NAMI table. There are things I'd like to say about school psychologists, but they're very hard to find these days, so I'm going to speak about school social workers. School social workers provide mental health services in the schools, and we have hired them, and thank you for doing so. We have, for example, a full-time school social worker at the high school. You probably know, but in case you don't, school social workers don't just provide clinical services to high-need kids. They're not just doing therapy with the really troubled ones. They're there to serve the entire school. So they're supporting Tier 1 school-wide positive things for all the students. They're working at Tier 2 in the student support team to do problem solving for kids as their problems are emerging. And they're also doing individual and group treatment for the really needy kids. They're also there to consult with the school counselors, with the administration, and school staff, and they can provide mental health support in the school for staff members who need it. It is essential that you keep who you have. Thank you very much for not cutting them. I'm not hearing you promising you're not going to cut them, but let me say, please don't. And you really need a full-time one at the middle school. And it's not just to deal with a few troubled kids. It is to help the middle school develop the kind of systematic approach to behavioral support that the high school and many of the elementary schools are already developing. I know this is so discouraging to hear all this. You can't add anything to this budget, I guess. Maybe you can. Find a way to do it. I really think you need a full-time social worker at the middle school. And I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fluke. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the notification of our next meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County will be held on Monday, May 8th, 2023, beginning at 5:30 p.m. with the open session. Open session will be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session will resume at 6:30 p.m. This meeting will be located at the administrative building in the boardroom, this room, at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661.
May I interrupt for just a moment? I would recommend that we start closed session at 5 o'clock as opposed to 5:30, because we have another matter of an appeal that needs to be revisited. We also have the CAC applications that we're going to have to determine who's going to be appointed. And so I would like to see us start at 5 o'clock if at all possible.
How does the board feel about starting at 5 o'clock?
That's fine.
Okay, so I will revise that. The next meeting will be on Monday, May 8th, 2023, beginning at 5:30 p.m. with 5 p.m. Baby, I'm getting there, with open session. Open session will be followed by board members going into closed session. That open session will resume at 6:30 p.m. The meeting will be here in the administrative building in this boardroom at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661.
Thank you.
Thank you. The last item on the agenda is to adjourn. The administration is recommending approval to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion to do so?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Rhodes has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second. No, it's fine.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any comments or questions?
I just wanted to say the April CAC meeting had been rescheduled, and the new meeting date is May 16th at 5:30.
Okay,
Which means,
that was the
That's
CAC.
CC.
Yeah, the Citizens Advisory. Committee.
Citizens Advisory Committee. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Hearing no other questions or comments, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the